Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Tulley, President and Executive Writing Coach at Defend, Publish, and Lead. Welcome to episode 158, Set Realistic Writing Goals for 2024. In this episode, I just want to share with you a couple of things that I've been thinking about to decide what types of writing goals I want to work on in the new year and what kinds of goals that our clients setting with us that maybe have a little bit more reality to them than the big lofty writing goals about, I'm going to make sure that I'm writing 20 hours every week, or I'm going to publish 6 articles this year, or something like that. And so I'm going to share a screen with an upcoming free webinar that we're doing in January on this topic. So I encourage you, if you're listening to this episode, to go grab a seat in that. As always, all of our events are on Eventbrite, and the link will be in the show notes. But what we're going to do in this free webinar is talk through some realistic writing goals and how you might think through what's a realistic goal, which one maybe is not quite so realistic, is maybe more aspirational. And let me give you some examples of some of the goals that I know I have been thinking about. So I mentioned that I want to have one big goal for 2024. And at least for me, that one big goal is that I really want to work on closing out my writing projects. I mentioned before that I kind of have the bad habit of writing all the way up to the last possible minute before I have to go pick up a child or go to a meeting or go to a class. And so sometimes I've been burned. I haven't been able to, sometimes I've forgotten to save things. Sometimes I save them, but I don't carefully look at where that project got saved. And for some reason, it got saved in a random teaching folder. So I lose a lot of time looking for things. So, and by now, you would think I would know how to, remember to save my work, as we tell our students. But for me, that's a really bad habit because I'm always trying to squeeze out every last possible second. So I know for me, that's kind of an overarching goal that I'm going to have. But I started thinking that I really want to have 5 goals for the whole year, not just this one. That to me is number one. So I think it's okay to maybe even scaffold and say, okay, this is the priority, because for me, that is the priority. I didn't calculate this because I thought I would get really depressed, but I estimate I probably lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 50 hours a year looking for things. I'm notorious for looking for my keys. I'm notorious for looking for my phone. And I was talking with a client about this, and I said, well, why don't you put an air tag on it or put a tile on it? Believe me, everything is now tiled, including our dog. I have everything that has a tile or an air tag on it. So yes, it's something that I am paying attention to. So in some ways I can kind of stave this off, but with scholarly writing, I can't do that. I can't stick an air tag on a project. All I can have are good systems for labeling and kind of figuring out what I want to do. So before in this webinar, one of the things that we'll be doing, and this is going to be more of an active webinar, I'm going to give you some ideas of areas to think through that we're going to set some writing goals. But I think what helps here is to kind of think about what would be realistic. So realistic for me, to make sure that I'm closing all my projects, it's not that I say that I want to do it. What makes it realistic is that I have now set a limit for myself. And essentially this is, if I have 2 hours to write, I must stop 8 minutes before the time's up. So, and I know in a previous episode, I don't remember which one now, but I know I talked in a previous episode about why I chose 8 minutes. And as a refresh, I was thinking 10 minutes, to make sure I had more time to close it out. But I know for me, I will feel really annoyed that I'm wasting 10 minutes closing out a project. So I decided to go with 8 minutes. And that has really helped, because I notice now if I write from, say, 10 to noon, I'm getting really, really good at noticing, like, oh, it's 11:52. Like that 52 marker is now starting to stick in my head, where I'm more aware of the time, and I'm like, oh, I'm at my 8 minutes. I need to close my project. So that's the part that puts the reality on it. Like, it's not just that I'm saying I'm going to close my projects better. It's that I say I have to stop 8 minutes before. And notice this is a realistic goal. Like, that's not something where I say I'm going to close every project on time every day. Instead, what I'm doing is just saying, all right, if I have 4 writing sessions in a week, I have to make sure that I must stop 8 minutes before. So I want to do 4 more realistic goals like that, because already I've had some good success. Now, of course, with all New Year's resolutions and goals, people break them or maybe don't do them. But for me, that made it realistic. And I have noticed the other thing that it's helping me do in terms of my writing, because this is a project management thing, but this is actually also helping my writing, is I'm starting to think more organizationally as I'm saving these projects about bigger picture things. So, for example, I have to make the call like, is this an active writing project or is this a project that I'm only going to work on, once every couple of weeks? Is it something that I'm going to immediately be using, the next time? Like I'm going to use it tomorrow in my writing session or in 2 days from now. So I have to kind of think ahead to what am I working on? What are my projects that are prioritized? So I encourage you, if you're able to do it, to jump in on our free webinar or grab the recording. So it's on Monday, January 22nd. We do them this one will be at noon Eastern time. And then anybody who registers will get the recording, whether you attend live or not. But if you're able to attend live, we're actually going to work in there and kind of talk through some of those goals and actually like think through some heuristic questions about writing and where you need the most help. So for me, I know this one was my closing my writing project goal was a particular pain point for me because I just get so frustrated and be like, I know better. I coach writing. I write stuff on scholarly productivity and I still don't do it. So I have not thought about what my other 4 goals are, but I know I have areas that I want to look at. And so I'm basically going to give us a couple of things to kind of think through. What are some goals that we can do? Also, as a look ahead to some of our offerings for our workshops and our classes, I know that we've had many, many clients ask about this, but they basically asked about how to make over some of their writing habits in a way that's a little bit more focused. So if you really want to work on, for example, your actual writing sessions, like if you say, okay, I'm going to write for an hour before my kids get up, or I'm going to write on Fridays from 1 to 4 because that's the time that I'm available. What am I doing in that writing session? And so our workshop that will be coming up, and it is not posted yet, I will get it up there, but this one is going to really focus on 4 different areas that you can look at for a reset that will make a big difference in terms of getting writing produced and actually completed. So if you remember back to one of our previous podcast episodes on movement and completion, those are really the 2 things we're always striving for at Defend, Publish, and Lead when we help clients, is that we're trying to get you to make some progress on your project, but also move it towards completion. So you're not just in a circular cycle where you're just, writing, but you're never getting anywhere. We want to get beyond that. So the other nice thing about this particular free webinar is that the realistic goals will be designed to do, there are things that you can actually do to make writing move forward. So getting back to the example of the closing a project, that might seem like, well, how is that making writing move forward? You're actually taking 8 minutes off of working on it. But I would argue that just the sheer amount of time I'm saving in being able then, let's say the next day happens, in my closing, I mentioned this a little bit, but just as a little preview of how this might work. When I close a writing project for 8 minutes, it's not that I take 8 minutes to save it and then I go about my business. No, like what I do is I take a few notes. Where did I leave off? What did I put in that last paragraph? What idea was I thinking about when it was 11:52 and I had 8 minutes left? So I can do as much of I can as the capture of where I was in that writing process before I have to go. So I've taken to writing some really good notes. So basically in my draft, what this looks like is I just, I highlight a bunch of stuff in yellow where I stopped, make a comment, and just write myself a bunch of notes in the comment. And then when I come back to it, I make sure I address all the things in the comment, delete the comment, take the highlight off. And then again, when I'm stopping the next time, I do the same thing. Sometimes it's not so much something I'm doing in a draft. Sometimes it's more like, hey, you've got to go ahead and look for this other source. Sometimes I'll even make a Post-it note and slide it into my laptop so I know I can do something with that. I've tried to stay with the color yellow for closing because it's kind of like caution, don't forget about this stuff. Like that's the way that I think about it. I also think of yellow as kind of like slowing down before you hit a red traffic light. So that has really stuck with me, that it reminds me I've got to slow down and make sure I know what it is that I'm doing. So hopefully that helps for this week, and I encourage you to grab a seat in the free webinar. I'll say more things about our spring offerings for those of you that attend, and a little bit more on that next week. Happy writing.